Naspers, which interestingly enough, if you look at its annual results a few months ago, only derives, I think, 6% of its global earnings from a place called South Africa. But Naspers, a few years ago, acquired a company called Biscape in Brazil, which dominates the online payment industry in the southern cone of South America. So it's the PayPal of Latin America, or the southern part of it, and they've done extraordinarily well there. And then we have Distel, my favorite story. Because when I became an ambassador, you see, being a bit of a swot, I called for all the figures. I thought I'm not going to too many cocktail parties. I must do the business. So I looked at Paraguay, and I thought, oh, I don't know what I could do about this. The terms of trade are so slight, and we had about 17 million rand. So I thought, well, this is quite interesting because, you could only go up from here. And then I looked a bit closer at the figures, and I saw that the number one export of South Africa to the Republic of Paraguay was spirits and liqueurs, it said. And that entirely comprises a product called Amarula. But it is not confined to Paraguay. It's in Argentina, it's in Uruguay, and it's in Brazil. If you look at the way that Amarula is marketed, it brings together, if you like, forgive the pun, a sweet spot, because it's Africa in a very exotic way, it's romance, and it's sweet. And you will discover, as I'm afraid my waistline shows, that certainly in Argentina and surrounding countries, they play a thing called dulce de leche, which is a form of triple-decked caramel dessert, which is addictive. And so if you hit the sweet spot in Argentina, you're on something very good, and surrounding countries. So what's more interesting is that for Distel and Amarula, the southern cone of South America is their second biggest market in the world outside of South Africa. So that was interesting. And perhaps the most interesting of all is the case of Standard Bank. Because Argentina became famous or infamous in 2001 when it posted the largest sovereign debt default in modern economic history. Oh, that was before Greece, of course, but Greece was bailed out by the ECB. There was no ECB to bail Argentina out in 2001, and it posted a sovereign debt default of $160 billion, which caused the most terrible, not just commercial damage, but psychological damage to people in their relationship with financial institutions. Because if you had your money, as you could keep it in dollars, as many did, and overnight there was a mandatory devaluation, you suddenly found yourself holding no longer dollars but pesos, and the value of your holdings was down to somewhere between 30 and 50%. So people literally were impoverished overnight because of the crash that happened. Now, I'm not going to give you the details here, but I suppose I must punt my book. It's all in my book. But there's something more significant than that in terms of South Africa. You would have thought, well, with all this background, the last place that you would go and acquire a financial institution is Argentina. But 4 years after that crash, that's precisely what Standard Bank did. It went and bought Bank Boston for a modest amount of money, rebranded Bank Boston as Standard Bank of Argentina, went very cleverly into the double sponsorship of not just the Argentine football team, but the national rugby team as well, which were suddenly wearing the Standard Bank and Visa jersey. And they made a huge success. So that by the time they sold it last year for $650 million US to their Chinese partner ICBC, they had become the 7th biggest retail bank in Argentina. And also hugely helpful for our diplomatic projection there. But sadly, I think the Chinese are going to be a little less enthusiastic about punting South Africa's Standard Bank was. But that's, as Derek Keyes once said to me when I asked him a question, what he was going to do, he said, that's somebody's problem, but it's not my problem. But actually, of all the South African success stories in terms of the corporates, and you're going to hear from the horse's mouth tomorrow, SAB Miller is, to me, the most interesting for a number of reasons I'm going to briefly elaborate on. The first is the very stark similarities between doing business in South Africa and Africa and doing business in Latin America. And before I get on to those as given from the horse's mouth, let me just make this point about SAB Miller. There's a standout figure in their annual report. And that is that they operate in 75 countries in the world. Well, that's what you do if you're the second biggest brewer in the world. You're in a lot of countries. But only 7 of those 75 countries are in Latin America. And from those 7 countries, or in those 7 countries, they have 13% only of the beer market in the region. So 7 countries, operations, 13% of the total beer market, only a tenth of their international footprint in terms of country presence. But here's the thing. From that relatively modest total, SAB Miller derives 33% of its global profits come from Latin America. It is the biggest performer in terms of the bottom line than any other region on earth.